Welcome back to NAMPO Virtual. Today we are talking about the future of farming, which is a subject that is vastly interesting, I think, to all of us involved in the agricultural industry. With me to discuss this topic is Brett Bigerman. He is the Chief of Operations for Crop Science Bayer globally, and of course Klaus Eckstein. Klaus is the Managing Director of Bayer Crop Science for Southern and Eastern Africa. Firstly, Brett, let me ask you, we know that with agricultural companies and their relationship with their customers, I almost want to say that a company needs to be customer obsessed when it comes to its service delivery to its customers. Am I right?
Thank you, Garrett. I couldn't agree more. I think everything we do in agriculture as a multinational company has to start with our customer. And I always say if we do the best job serving our customer, our company will do just fine, because it has to start with the customer. And I think there's no better time to really see that come to life than with the challenge that we're facing today in global agriculture with the pandemic, the COVID-19 that we're all facing around the world. And farming doesn't have the luxury of shutting down. We have to keep going, and that's why in many countries it's an essential business. And when the season is there, like it's going to be in South Africa soon, and farmers are going to plant, they got to plant. That's the weather that dictates that. And we have to work together. And who would have ever believed in January that this is the way we would be operating agriculture through most of the season in the Northern Hemisphere, and now in the Southern Hemisphere starting the same way, doing meetings like this virtually and still getting the crop planted. And that supply linkage between us and the farmer is just so critical. And fortunately, in the vast majority of the world, the systems have worked. Farmers have been fantastic. I think they're the real heroes in this whole process. I commend the farmers in South Africa for the phenomenal job they're doing in this very challenging time. And we have to be right there with them, and we'll win together.
From your perspective, the American farmers' experience of this COVID pandemic, how did it impact those farmers?
Well, it's a great question, Garrett. Given they're in the Northern Hemisphere, when the pandemic was starting to become a real issue in March, that's when North American farmers were getting active and ready to go to the field. So it literally hit right when they were going to plant. So we had a lot of concerns, both internally as well as with our customers, on supply chains and whether or not the seed, the crop protection would be there for them, the fertilizer to use as they needed it to plant the crop. And to the credit of the entire industry, it's just been a phenomenal step up. But we had to do things so many different ways, and it was actually quite rewarding to sit back and watch how everybody worked so collaboratively together to make it happen. Farmers were making adjustments, we were making adjustments, retail partners were making adjustments. Probably the biggest thing that impacted us was some of the supply chains were highly disrupted in some of the fruits and vegetable crops. When restaurants were shut down, consumers eat differently when they eat at home than when they eat out, and they eat different vegetables, they eat different fruits, and the supply chain was quite turned upside down for a period of time. But much of that has now been sorted out, and it's working fine. To the credit of farmers and agriculture, food security has never become a real issue. There are parts of the world where it is an issue every year. The pandemic hasn't made it worse. We've been able to manage our way through that, and that's a credit to farmers.
Klaus, what Brett is saying sounds almost a carbon copy of the South African experience, isn't it?
Correct. I mean, in South Africa, we had a similar situation. I was just thinking back about stage 5, end of March, correct, and a virtual stop of the economy in South Africa. But luckily, we were in essential services and agriculture, so our production plants could go on, our supply chain could go on. We very quickly had to adapt into a virtual world, and the farmers played with us. So we started very quickly to launch products digitally. and still allowed us, after of course having all our permits right, to go onto farm and have the one-to-one visit. So even allowing us to do that from that point of view. So I think from that point of view, we can be very lucky, and we see that also in the GDP response of South Africa, where actually agriculture is the only sector in the economy that's actually performing positively, thanks to the farmers, thanks for being there, keeping their eye on the ball and actually keeping operations going. And on the other side, also overcoming the challenges. I mean, Brett was speaking about challenges now. I mean, the first thing we were seeing in South Africa was, of course, the ban of alcohol, correct? Which impacted the wine industry. I don't know if you remember that time. Then the wool industry started to cry up. And suddenly we're now hearing about the barley industry, correct? The beer consumption stopped virtually, and looking for new outlets of barley at this point in time. And on the positive side, and we cannot attribute that maybe 100% to COVID, but maybe also to the currency impact that we're suffering in South Africa, that's really impacting us from an import point of view. But I mean, people that are exporting, on the other side, like the citrus market, the grape market, they are profiting on the short term from that type of trends and making profit out of the weak currency, while importing, of course, is a challenge. The weak rand, of course, is also can be seen stabilizing our commodity markets, and specifically on corn and maize at the moment. So I think creating a fairly good atmosphere, I would say, the start of the season going onward.
Something that COVID showed me was the adaptability of farmers, especially when it comes to technology. And one of the trends in technology, of course, is digitalization. Now, Brett, can you maybe shed some light for us on the digitalization of agriculture from the US, how it plays a role in farmers' day-to-day lives over there?
Yeah, I would tell you that we're fortunate in the industry to be as far along with digital as we are when the pandemic hit. It's amazing to me. I would tell you that I think we advanced our digital capability in agriculture by several years because we had to. It wasn't optional. We had to use the digital tools, and doing virtual plot tours and doing virtual launches as was described by Klaus, and connecting with farmers. And I have to tell you, farmers are well ahead of the curve. I was really impressed with the capability of farmers to do that. And one of the areas we're using digital that we had started on was for tracking information in the field. We have a product that, and I'm super excited because we're going to launch it next year in South Africa as well. It's called Climate Field View. And it's a tool for farmers to track all of their operation agronomically, what crop they're planting, the density that they're planting, and gather all of that information, also the crop protection products that they're utilizing, and then being able to look back at the yield information and draw conclusions and insights out of that information in real time to help inform them. And I've seen an incredible jump in the use of digital technology this past year, where farmers were in their field with their phones, and they reverse it and they show the salespeople as well as their retail partners their fields virtually, because at that time we weren't allowed to go into the fields and go see the farmer, but we could still look at the situation that they were faced. And help them make the best decision at the time. And having access to the data and the information and the satellite images that were already available in Field View was a huge advantage. And I think it's really demonstrated some of the power of the digital tools that we already had available. And it creates excitement for what else we can do and how much further we can drive that. So I think you'll see an acceleration of the digital tools. Not only in the U.S., we're seeing that in South America, we're seeing that in Europe, and soon to be in South Africa as we get the platform up and running in South Africa.
Now, Klaus, one thing about digitalization, of course, there needs to be a vast amount of trust between the farmer that's generating the data, and of course his company that uses that data to help him. I think we've had a discussion and a bit of a chat in the past where we said it's a symbiotic relationship. How can we use this data to up our productivity and to make our farmers even more efficient in their day-to-day farming activities?
I think it speaks to agriculture. I mean, it's that that leap that we were waiting for so long time, where we can actually start, looking at agriculture from a production point of view when we're talking about the inputs, combining it with soil, with climate, but in future also obviously with markets if we can, correct? Really putting that first into sensors, understanding that from a farm and from a field point of view, and sometimes from a square meter point of view, and actually understanding what is the diversity of the growing conditions and how can we actually de-risk agriculture. Because at the end, agriculture is happening in a piece of land in a soil subjected by climate. And the more we can learn through digital technology, the better we will understand the various facets of varying climatic conditions, varying commodity prices, and we can then put it back into perspective. What you're addressing basically now is to actually say we can do a lot of things. We can create these ecosystems around data and inviting other companies to join that can really add to the value of farming. But there's actually no value if you don't have the trust of farmers. And I think this is where we really start and have to build that bonding that goes much stronger, that the farmer actually says, look guys, I think you can add a lot of value to my farm, and digital actually brings me into a different leap of agriculture, specifically in a country like South Africa, where we're really having up to 7 different maize producing areas depending on soil, climate, and the variables that are coming with it. It actually asks for this technology and actually will empower the farmer to make much better choices in order to increase productivity and sustainability of farming operations. So it's really a very exciting technology to have and to build and to really expand on partnerships also in our country.
Brett, I want to ask you on that point of partnerships. Farmers come in all shapes and sizes, specifically sizes. On a global scale, Bayer's partnership with the smaller farmers, how does that work?
Yeah, it's, I always say in agriculture, you don't have a choice of where you go in the world. You go where the land is and where the farmers are. And when you go to where the farmers are, to your point, they come in different sizes for sure, different levels of capability and experience. And we pattern our work in our geographies around the world to support the agriculture that exists. One of the really cool things about digital technology is it's scale neutral. So much of what we can do with large scale agriculture, those same tools can be quickly applied to smaller scale agriculture. And in some cases, you actually see an even bigger improvement because the small scale operator hasn't been able to use even the tools that were available before and didn't have all the same insight that larger operations would have had. So we pattern our work behind the scale of the operator themselves. And to Klaus's point, one of the really cool things with when you bring together the environment and the genetics and the crop protection products and the fertility all into one system, in a data system that the farmer's looking at, it doesn't matter if you're applying that to many hectares or whether you're applying that to 1 hectare. The ability to use that data and create insights is effective because we're building models that don't make recommendations per hectare. They actually do it by square meter. So you look at a field and sometimes it looks like it's all the same, and the reality is it's quite different. And we probably should have a different planting population across that hectare. We should be using our crop protection products in a different way across that hectare. And as we gather the data and as we look across the total, it informs us whether we're small or large to make a better decision to increase the productivity. And I just want to echo Klaus's point. The only way this works is that there is a trusting relationship between those of us collecting data and working with the farmer and the farmer. And our model from the very beginning when we started building this was crystal clear. The farmer owns the data. It's their choice as to who they share that data with. We provide a platform that they can upload their data into, and they do that in real time, but then it's their choice on whether or not they share that with other participants, other agronomic advisors or other companies, et cetera. We make our system open so that others can participate. We have 60-some partners today that work on the FieldView platform where farmers can utilize different suppliers for different uses. and provide that information into the platform all digitally. They don't have to do it manually. And again, that's one of those things for smallholder agriculture, just like large acres. They have different suppliers, and those suppliers can have access to that information and work together with them. So I think digital is one of those things that will help us with the divide, if you want to call it that, between large and small, because it's scale neutral. It can apply to big and it can apply just as well to small.
Yeah, that is something that that I find extremely encouraging, Klaus, is the fact that digitalization is scale neutral, because we sit with a unique, I almost want to say, situation in South Africa. We've got commercial farmers who are very large farmers, and then we've got our own smallholder farmers. But also our smallholder farmers have got a valuable contribution to bring to the South African agricultural landscape, don't they?
Sure. I mean, let's maybe talk first on a bigger scale, correct? Let's maybe talk on the Africa scale, or maybe talk globally if you want, correct? So if you talk about global, I mean, the global population is estimated to increase by 2 billion people in the next 15, 20 years, correct? Where do you think that growth will come from? It will come of two parts of the world, Asia Pacific and Africa, correct? Yeah. So who is going to be the carrier of that population? It's the farmer.
It's the farmer,
And here we're talking a lot, of course, about the commercial farmer, but also that smallholder farmer that have to do a significant contribution, therefore a significant leap. If we therefore talk about digital technology in Africa, and you will see it here also if you go into the Eastern Cape, into KwaZulu-Natal, or even into Limpopo, sometimes the infrastructure is brittle, correct? If you go in Africa, we always talk about the last mile, correct? In the last mile, you can do two things. You can do smart partnering to get into, or you use digital, correct? And I think the scale on which digital can actually start impacting these agricultural systems in smallholder farmers, it's so vast. You just need to phase it into the right level of development of the respective communities, correct? So if you talk, for example, on a South African, let's call it emerging development farming community, there's really a unique situation that we have in the country where these farmers are smallholder farmers as you and me would understand them, correct? 1 to 5 to 10 hectares. But they're actually producing with biotechnology, correct? So this is unique probably in the world where you actually have these type of communities that are showcasing this. And I think really a picture going towards in future, as the biotech market starts opening in Africa, we have a great opportunity to showcase that. On the other side, we should also not fall back and be blindfolded, because we need to talk to these farmers as business people. Because only if we get them to produce profitably and sustainably, we will actually start helping in transforming agriculture in South Africa and make them part of the food value system that is so important for us as a country with 58 million, with a lot of still, I would say, people without a job or without proper food every day. It's a major contribution that these farmers can do. And I think we have to do that together with partners. Like for example, the Farmer Development Program, which we are doing together with Grain SA, who can really and has shown that big developments are happening and will happen.
Yeah, it's incredible, the example that you mentioned of biotechnology. And when I hear biotechnology, the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is consumer trends. Brett, what is your experience in terms of consumer trends? How do consumer trends impact the way that farmers go about their business in the US?
It's the whole use of biotechnology around the world is it's a very different situation. If you think about the Americas, so from Canada, US, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, widely utilized as a tool in agriculture, and it's extensively utilized in corn or I should say maize for South Africa, maize and soybean production. And also being utilized in a few other crops such as canola, cotton, which are smaller acres, but it's widely utilized. In the case of South Africa, it's been utilized for some time, and I applaud South Africa and the farmers in South Africa for working towards that new technology and getting it established in their use. As you look at Asia Pacific and you look at Africa and Europe, it becomes much more spotty. So in Asia, you have Bangladesh, which is wildly utilized in biotech with great success in vegetable production, particularly the BT brinjal or eggplant, depending on where you're from. Australia is widely adopted biotechnology and using it very extensively. We're starting to see a lot more in China. When you look at Africa and Europe, you see South Africa very successfully utilizing it. And Europe has always been much more conservative around biotechnology and slower to adopt. It's a tool in the toolbox, and it's unfortunate that farmers there haven't had access. But I have to tell you, the conversation has changed a lot in the last few years. And part of the conversation change is it's been around 25 years. It's not new anymore. It's widely utilized in agriculture around the world. Hundreds of millions of acres every year utilizing biotechnology, and the results are quite fantastic. To Klaus's point, it's another one of those technologies that's scale neutral. It can be highly beneficial to smallholders, just like it can to larger operations. And it's a technology that I think is getting a new life, if you will. And I sure hope so, because another whole area of innovation, and I think innovation's the answer to driving through all the challenges that agriculture faces, is gene editing. It's a whole nother field of, some will call it biotechnology, some will call it breeding. It's new breeding technologies, but they're genetic in nature. It's going to open another whole door for innovation in agriculture. And I'm excited to see that the world is having a new conversation about biotechnology in agriculture, because I think it can make a real difference. I'm super excited about the progress in Africa. And it's always slow, but we're making progress and it's going in the right direction. And I more often look at trend lines than I do look at points in time, and the trend line is very favorable right now.
Wow, that's fantastic. Klaus, the South African experience, the South African consumer, how much education do we still need to do with the South African consumer to make them understand that agriculture has got their best interests at heart when it comes to biotech?
I think, as Brett says, there's a lot of adoption, correct? Over the last 22 years, the South African consumer has been consuming. There's, of course, a lot of awareness around that. You will see it in the supermarkets of non-GM type of, which I think it's being transparent, correct? The consumer needs to have choices from that point of view. On the other side, I think on the other side, what is crucial from that point of view is actually to understand the value that this type of technology gives to farming and gives to also healthy and affordable food production. And I think this is a very important topic for us in South Africa, where you really have low to middle income class in South Africa that are really looking forward to become a middle class into the future, that of course contributing and are requiring high quality and demanding high quality of food at affordable prices. And I think this is where we can really make a difference and continue to make a difference. The other area that I think you might be referring to is, of course, the vegetable market and, of course, the fruit market, correct? I think on the fruit market, it's fairly easy because, I mean, we're exporting fruit. We're exporting fruit from South Africa over decades already into Europe, into the Middle East, to a smaller scale also into North America. But I mean, there the checks and balances, not only from a trade point of view, but also from a supermarket retail point of view, are in place. To some extent critical sometimes, because you always get higher standards to an extent where suddenly production systems maybe become brittle, and suddenly you say, I cannot produce this type of quality anymore with the framework that you're giving me. So this is a balance between supply chain and retail. But I think being on the forefront and also giving information about what program of crop protection do you spray, what products do you use, and what residue do you generate at the end in relation to the freshness of a fruit crop that is then available 12 months a year on a shelf, is important for a South African consumer and for a European consumer. The same, of course, opportunity happens on vegetables. And I think on vegetables, of course, we're not exporting that much, but I think there's of course, a high call. And I think maybe COVID might have to do that as well, because we're going more into a healthier type of consumption pattern from the South African population is getting more into vegetables, getting more into this high vitamin crop, citrus maybe. We don't know whether that's a trend or just a short-term observation, but maybe that's something to comment in future.
Now, as manager that's also involved on the African continent, what is your experience in terms of the acceptability of biotech in the continent itself?
It's really a long story that we are working on for the last 12 years, correct? So why am I saying that's a long story? Because what you need to do, you need to allow space to educate and to see, correct? So we have, over the last 12 years, had exposure to biotech into Africa. However, what we're seeing over the last 3 to 4 years, and this is why Brett is saying we're really seeing some fast-moving change at the moment. We're seeing that this technology, seeing in the context, for example, in a fall armyworm environment. So a very clear differentiation of to say, here we can do something with a seed that has a biotech trait into it that can actually actively contribute that 60% of a crop in Africa is not destroyed by actually having an amino acid of a biologic compound into it. Correct? So it's really brilliant stuff, correct? So what happened first thing is there was a deregulation of a trade last year on cotton. So we have now 4 countries on cotton that have deregulated cotton on a BT trade. We're now actually looking into, after seeing success from this from various authorities, to also look into corn, correct? And we are confident, of course, that in the next year or so, we're going to get some deregulation also on corn, which might not be then through us, but through a partnership that we're managing in Africa, and become available to smallholder farmers in Africa for sustainable food production in Africa that actually addresses also part of our vision that we're talking, which we say is health for all and hunger for none. And this is a substantial building block from that point of view.
Now, the African population as a whole is quite young, actually. We sit with a lot of people under the age of 30, and of course these are the people who have to get back into farming. They have to grow into the farming environment. Brett, your experience, younger farmers coming to the farm, what strengths do they bring?
Well, I think there's a couple of things when I think about the younger generation that's entering, and I think it's a truism around the world. Number one, they're more digitally inclined because they've experienced a lot more digital things in their personal life as they've matured. They're also very interested in the overall climate and environment. And that's a good thing for agriculture. We've made huge improvements in agriculture over the last 30 years, improving the sustainability of agriculture, but we're not there yet. We need to keep going. And some of the things Klaus was describing, and you take these digital tools and you put them together with advanced seed technology and advanced scripting of crop protection products, and all of a sudden we can start seeing ways that we can increase the productivity utilizing the precious land and water that we have to use in a more efficient way than we ever have before. And on top of that, not only utilizing crop protection and protect, but we can put it where it needs to be. So we actually use less stuff and still increase the productivity more. One of the biggest reductions in crop protection products in the world has been the advancement of biotechnology, and it makes a huge contribution. And now we're moving into areas where some of the young people are the ones that are the most excited about a new idea that we have that we started in the US and in South America and Brazil this year, and we're going to take it to other parts of the world, but utilizing agriculture to sequester carbon. And as farmers use agricultural systems that do less tillage and less disruption to the soil and using cover crops, those crops sequester carbon in the soil. And we believe that we can create a value stream for farmers to actually be paid for doing the right thing on their farm that many of them are already doing anyway, to sequester that carbon. And that younger generation is hungry for that. They think about the environmental situation more. They're more digitally inclined. They have access to information that they've just always had it. So it's a building block, if you will. And I think that next generation is helping with some of the trends that we're seeing across agriculture and the acceleration of digital and some of the other tools.
Klaus, yes, carbon sequestration is a relatively new term in South African agriculture. I would like to find out, how do you make money sequestering carbon? How does that work?
Yeah, I would like to come back maybe first to the use topic, because I think it's a very interesting question that you answered. I think there's two topics there. The one topic is, am I still interested as a young person into agriculture, correct? Or do I rather go urban and really make my money in urban, correct? So you're not only seeing that question in South Africa, but you see in many rural areas of Africa to actually see, I'm going to go urban, I want to make my money there. So what is the call that we should make in agriculture? It's exactly what Brett is talking right now. He's saying, let's really see how sexy agriculture is. And we really combine that into a digital world where we actually can start talking about producing more with less. And therefore adding not only to a sustainability of our planet, but still make business. And see these young people as business entrepreneurs. And I think this is actually where young people are actually getting into space and becoming very interesting on agriculture. Turning this around maybe into a South African young farmer, if that young farmer can get digital tools and inputs into his hands and suddenly make 2 or 3 or 5 or 20,000 decisions on his farm that in former generations he could make 20 or 30 annual cycles, it is really a very interesting field in where we want to go and actually start contributing in making agriculture. I think maybe to your question is, how does a farmer make money in agriculture? I would not see it maybe too direct. I would ask back the question to Brett, how do we actually make money out of that? But I mean, I see a lot of value into a low to no tillage system to actually start putting carbon back in soil. I mean, our soils in South Africa are really very low in carbon. Specifically, we talk about the Free State, the Highveld. And if you really start with these, low no tillage systems with cover crops, you're actually putting back a lot of carbon into the soil. Therefore, you're contributing to carbon reduction, but you're also you're working on your soil fertility, correct? And I think this is overall where you're adding to the productivity of your soil over generations. So that is the value that I would foresee out of these production systems. One just needs to see them over time. You cannot just compare a system to conventional today and then no tillage tomorrow and expect the different. It's really different production systems, and you need to look at them over time.
Brett, the financial aspect behind that, how does that work?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, and exactly to Klaus's point, you basically combine the agronomic systems and healthy soils with sequestering carbon, and so there's a agronomic benefit to the farmer, but it takes time, and it happens over time as you build that soil, and that's a good thing for all of us in society, because the water holding capacity goes up, the nutrition to the plants goes up, and those things all improve. I'd take you back to if you read global press, there's a lot of companies that are saying today, I want to become carbon neutral, or I want to reduce my carbon footprint by 50%, and they're making bold statements, and which are all good things, and they're all coming from the right place. In many cases, they're heavy users of fossil fuels and other things. They can't do it themselves in their own operation. While they can make substantial improvement, they can't get as far as they want to go. So they have to buy credits. They buy carbon credits from other producers that have made more dramatic changes. So that's how you create the business model. So the farmer sequestering carbon creates a carbon credit that they can sell to somebody else that needs that carbon credit because they can't quite get there on their own. So they buy that credit from the farmer. That's what creates additional value stream for the farmer on the carbon side. And of course, as a company, we have to have some role to play in that. And we're creating the platform, Field View, for the tracking information to provide the confidence. We've provided the environmental models, working with third-party companies to certify those models that they actually do sequester the carbon, and then creating a trading system that allows those companies to access those carbon credits directly to farmers. So I think it's a real opportunity where the farmer wins, we can win as a company, and the environment wins. So society wins, the planet wins. It's a great outcome for everyone. It's not a perfect system yet. We still have a lot of work to do, but we're excited to get it off the ground. And we actually have farmers participating as we speak in North America and South America, and we want to test it there and then start expanding it globally.
Oh, that is a fantastic point to end off our discussion. I want to thank you both. Brett, thank you so much for your time and your inputs. It was a fascinating conversation. And Klaus, thank you very, very much. I really enjoyed our time, and I'm very sure that our viewers also learned a lot going into the future of farming.
Thank you. And thanks for facilitating this virtual NAMPO. I think we're learning a lot out of that. And seeing you, of course, next year.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there you have
Thanks
it.
for the opportunity to participate. I really enjoyed it. And I would just say all the best to all the farmers across South Africa as you get ready to plant the crop. And be healthy and be safe and take care of yourselves.
Yeah, and there you have it. This was an absolutely fascinating discussion. I think we all learned a lot. And yeah, good luck. We look forward to seeing you again. And we'll be right back after this.